Okay peoples, this is my wood stove. I made a video showing me lighting it, and between butt crack and blooming me covering the thing and covering everything, I explained it wasn't very grand a video. So I got it running anyway. I sort of cleaned her all up with a bit of a wire brush just recently. I've got to get this going because, well, I can use my little fart stove here. Little butane banger, but I've got a fair bit to cook and I don't really want to go through a whole stack of these. So I got the wood one going, and of course I had to clean it out and sweep it out and whatnot, and of course the first thing the trolls are going to say is, "Oh, you've got blooming cardboard boxes here." Doesn't matter. That is there. It's fibre. That is 4 inches thick from here right the way up, all the way around. This is something my uncle had, and yeah, basically I think it's made in the turn of the century. It's made in a suburb of the capital in this state. It was a bit damaged. It was missing, careful here, it might be warm, the ashtray, which I made completely myself. All sheet metal, rivets. I think it was an angle grinder, a hammer, and a bit of 4x4 pine, and a cordless drill and a riveter, and I made this. And that was missing. So was the hot plate. The hot plate should be about a 1/4 inch thick. It's actually a 1/2 inch thick, and yeah, it's sitting up a little bit. And I won't touch it because I burn myself. But basically, we've got 2 half chain links. And then we get said tool, little hooks, and you can basically just hook her in like so, and lift it up. Now, why would you want to take the hot plate out? Unfortunately, that's where you've got to keep filling the fuel up. It was also pretty gangly down the bottom here, and I ended up angle grinding off a bunch of gangly sheet metal and put in a whole heap of screws there. Those are 3 inches long or something, and there's a whole stack of them. I think I used about 42 because they're all down through the sides to give it a bit of like reinforcement, or basically to hold the concrete to the rest of the device, a bit like Rio sort of thing in a way. I put all these screws in. But I put them below where the grill goes, because the grill cuts right through into the sheet metal there, like it's sitting right in the sheet metal, because it's got to hold the fabrics. The fabrics sit on basically the sides of the grill down there. So anyway, I cut all this muck off, and then I made a bit of formwork up as well and stuck it around the side, and I put all these screws in here, and then I poured concrete in there while I had the whole thing upside down. And then after the concrete set, I turned it over and then managed very, very difficultly, because this thing is probably about 80 kilograms, to get this from down here upside down to up here. And yeah, so basically this here acts as your airflow. It's just cement sheet, that can act as your airflow, and you put that on there and it will burn slowly. But for the initial batch of wood, you've got to basically put in paper, like smaller wood, and then like bits of 4x2, and you burn out one batch of wood initially, and that'll get you heating your hot plate, and then you take your hot plate off with that, fill it up with more 4x2. This is after there's coals all on the bottom and it's sort of more or less burnt out that first batch of wood. You take the hot plate off, throw more 4x2 in, put the hot plate back on, and then instead of just having this sitting on the side or whatever, put it like that, and then you get a piece of wood and you prop him up like that, and it'll slow down the burn rate. You only actually light it through this and check how much wood you've got left by going like that, and there's the ash from the paper in there. Your wood's still going pretty good. Another thing I should mention is the silver paper at the back. You may be thinking, what's with all this blooming silver paper? Well, because this is such a brilliant stove and such a useless heater, in other words, it's just built to be a stove and works very well as a stove, basically you don't get much heat off it. I'm not joking. But seriously. You can put your hand on it and it's no big deal, even when you don't want to touch the cast bits doing that. Fire's been going for quite a while. No big deal. No big deal at all. Now, in all that, there's basically your hot plate and your stovepipe let off a lot of heat. And that silver paper goes up for another few foot more, and so does the stovepipe. That was my idea, to try and reflect a bit of heat out into the room. And believe it or not, it sort of works. You know, not very great, but you know, it does sort of work if you sit with this chair right up here. You can feel the heat coming off, and I think it's more a result of the silver paper doing it, or at least it assists in the heat coming off of it. There we go. Yeah, quite well. You may wonder what it is with the brick. Now that brick's relatively dirt free. Stupid base on this kept popping out, and I pushed it in and it just popped straight back out again. So I sort of thought, well, we'll make it pop in again. So set the brick on top. If that isn't proof I'm a hillbilly, then nothing ain't. But yeah, she's cooking away quite nicely. Yeah. Alrighty. I'll light her up for you and you can see go. Matches. There you go. It's going pretty quick, this. Yeah, the snot rag. Smoke drifting out near the hot plate. See the hot plate properly. That's it. That should be going enough. Suck up from the bottom. Smoke's still coming out from one corner of the hot plate. So I cleaned a little bit too much soot off the underside of the hot plate. I cleaned it up the other day and it's still got to block that cap up with soot again. Here we are. She's really getting going already. Out of one match. No fire lighters. Don't need fire lighters with this thing, it's too well designed. Probably a bit of moisture in it. Usually it really gets whistling and really gets going flat out, but I just remembered that the ground was wet yesterday Had a rain a little bit last night, and some of the stuff I'm using here would have actually got wet from that, which explains why it's crackling so much and why it isn't running quite as fast as it does sometimes. It's all the same, like, look at it, you know. It's going like a bat out of hell in there. It's also steaming up pretty badly too. Usually it's not this smoky. It's probably because it's also damp. It's half of it's steam. And also when I put the cover back on, the damper closes it up and it sort of slows it right up as much, and it doesn't sort of put out as much smoke in general because it hasn't got as much air coming into it, and it sort of slows the burn rate up quite a bit. You see a little bit of it here is actually going into the room, but it always used to do that quite significantly, and it usually does it when you start it anyway. But when I was running it in the other videos, there was almost zilch actually getting into the room once I put the cover on. But you've got to burn your first lot out and get a whole heap of red coals in there, and then refill it before it's worthwhile putting your cover on. Otherwise you just kill it before it gets going. So anyway, let's look at starting it with wood that probably was partially damp.